Simply introduce you to these concepts. I'm not expecting mastery today. I have 4 video segments that I'm going to tie into this, and I'm going to see if David can put those on at the end of the video as well. The start of this is going to be me on the chalkboard writing, and I'm going to suggest that you get recorded the information that I put on the board. Okay? Any questions before we begin? Nope. All right, so as an introduction, let's talk about what homeostasis means. So the first thing we're going to do is define homeostasis. What do you suppose homeostasis means?
Keeping it the same.
Keeping it real, keeping it the same. Yeah, what else?
Yeah, isn't it like keeping the pH, CO2 levels, temperature, everything level in the body?
Yeah, actually, the two of you have hit on good points, right? What it means and then examples, and that's actually where we're headed with the lecture. What it means, the definition that we're going to use for this class, homeostasis is the maintenance of a steady internal state despite external changes. The maintenance of a steady internal state, right? I'm going to abbreviate, internal state, despite external changes. And Sauerkraut, you gave a bunch of good examples of homeostasis. For this class, there's going to be 7 types of homeostasis you need to be aware of. And 2 of them we're going to go into great detail about. And you're going to need to explain how it works. But there's 7 that you need to be aware of. These 7 are body temperature, blood pressure, blood pH, O2 concentration. You guys remember from chemistry class, brackets refers to concentration. So oxygen concentration, CO2 concentration, osmoregulation, and blood glucose. Okay, so these are 7 examples of homeostasis in the human body that we're going to need to be aware of. You guys will be familiar with some of the prefixes associated with conditions that take you away from the set point. So you have a particular set point in your body for each of these. Let's take body temperature as an example. The set point is 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, right? And you know that if you get elevated above that, it's dangerous, and below that is dangerous. The prefixes associated with it are hyper for elevated and hypo for below, right? So hyperthermia refers to a body temperature that's above normal. Hypothermia refers to a body temperature that's below normal. And you often hear the word fever associated with an elevated body temperature. There's a difference between a fever and hyperthermia. A fever is a controlled change in the set point. So it's supposed to be 98.6, but you have an infection, and so you get a fever that elevates it and maintains it at a higher set point. Okay? Fevers can be dangerous if they get to a certain point, absolutely, and they're uncomfortable. However, they are a part of regulating your internal environment. Hyperthermia is a different case. Hyperthermia meaning body temperature above its optimum point in a dangerous way, for example, heat stroke. So if you're outside and it's extremely hot, you're doing a lot of exertion, you're not staying hydrated, and your body temperature elevates higher than your set point, hyperthermia can lead to a condition that will end up putting you in a hospital. And we know that hypothermia, if you go up and you're snowshoeing and you fall through a frozen lake, you're at risk of hypothermia, which of course is dangerous to the body as well. So each one of these has a set point, and then it has issues with going above or below the set point, right? So in body temperature, above is hyperthermia, below is hypothermia. In blood pressure, it's called hypertension and hypotension. Hyper above, higher blood pressure. Hypotension, low blood pressure. In blood pH, it's actually got a little bit different prefix, and this will make sense when you think about it from a chemistry perspective. We know that pH, if it's below 7, what is that called? Acidic, right? And if it's above 7, yeah, we refer to it as basic, but it's also called alkaline, right? So if you have a blood pH that's higher than 7.4, which is the set point for our blood pH, 7.4, if you're above that, it's called alkalosis, right? Meaning more alkaline than it should be. And if it's below 7.4, it's called acidosis, meaning it's more acidic than it should be. Oxygen, if you have too much oxygen in your blood, it's called hyperoxia. And if it's below the concentration, it's called hypoxia. Concentration of carbon dioxide, too much, is called, what do I have here? Hypercapnia, and too low is called hypocapnia. So you get the prefix, hyper, hypo. Hyper above, hypo below. All right. Water balance, we'll talk more about when we hit the kidneys. Osmoregulation refers to water balance. In our next week of instruction, it's going to be about kidneys and how they work in terms of water balance. And then our last thing is blood glucose. And so you've probably heard of hyperglycemia and hypoglycemia. You guys with me there? Yes? So we got 7 examples. They all have a set point where they're supposed to be optimally working, and above and below can be dangerous to the human body. Any questions so far? Nope. All right, let's talk about how these systems are controlled. I'm going to give you a generalized pathway, and then I'm going to use body temperature as an example of a specific case for this pathway. So the generalized pathway is that you have a change internally, right? So we've got an internal change that occurs, and that we have a sensor that detects that change. The sensor communicates with the comparator, which then is going to result in an effect. So it's going to actually communicate to what's called effector cells. Effector. Right? So we have specific effector cells that will cause you to return to normal. All right, so this is a generalized pathway for how we control these examples of homeostasis. So specifically, I'm going to draw out body temperature. And let's use the case that you have an internal change where you have a drop in your body temperature. All right? So what would that be called? What are you at risk of developing if you have a low body temperature? Hypothermia. So we're at risk of hypothermia, and our body system is going to account for this and try and return us to normal. All right? So we have sensors, and in this case, we have what's called thermoreceptors. And you're going to have 2 sets of thermoreceptors. There are thermoreceptors in the skin to detect, ooh, that's cold, right? There's also thermoreceptors in your brain that say our body, our core temperature is dropping. So there's 2 types of thermoreceptors, right? These thermoreceptors are going to communicate with the brain, a specific region of the brain I'll talk about in a moment. That's your comparator, right? So that's going to be the response. We'll just call it brain for now. I'll go into more detail about that in a second. Okay. It's going to then hit effector cells, and there's going to be 3 types of effectors that we're going to discuss. So we have one type of effector are going to be sweat glands. And what are they going to do if you're cold? Stop secreting sweat, right? So we have decreased sweat. Okay. Second type of effector cell is going to be skin arterioles. What are they going to do if you're cold? Yeah, they're going to constrict. So dilation means to get larger in size. Constrict means to get smaller. They're going to constrict blood flow to the skin. So skin arterioles specifically are going to constrict to conserve that thermal, temperature in your internal.
The core?
Yeah, to increase body temperature internally, they're going to constrict. The arterioles near the skin are going to constrict. So decrease blood flow. Decrease blood flow to the skin. Right, so you can conserve that heat for your internal organs. And then the final type of effector cell are going to be our skeletal muscles. And what are they going to do?
Shiver?
Yeah, they're going to cause you to shiver. So skeletal muscles cause shivering. And all of these things combined are going to hopefully return us to normal. Question?
What is the point of shivering? Like, why did skeletal muscles cause shivering? Obviously, to create the body, but
Yeah, so her question is, why do we shiver when we get cold? How does that actually affect our temperature, right? That's the question. So it's a good question. Anytime your cells do work, they're going to transfer energy. And whenever energy is transferred, it's downgraded. And the lowest form of energy is heat. Yeah, you're right. So it's going to generate body heat. All right? So this is the generalized path and then the specific example of body temperature. Questions so far? And just to give you a little bit more information, it's the anterior hypothalamus. So hypothalamus, that's the region of the brain. And we know anterior refers to the head or the face. Posterior refers to like the tail, the backside of it. So the anterior hypothalamus. Question, Dave Frank? No. Okay. Any other questions about this? Nope. So when the body returns to normal, are we just like, all right, we're good to go? Or do we have to actually signal our body, everything's okay, let's slow down this process? It's the second of the two, right? That's called negative feedback. So what happens is, once you return to normal, you actually send a signal back to the sensors. So we're going to go from our return to normal. We have to tell our sensors, okay, we're back to where we need to be. Stop making these changes. That's called negative feedback. So you're shivering, right? You're cold. Eventually, hopefully, you're going to stop shivering. Why do you stop shivering? Your body temperature has returned to normal, and you go back and tell the thermoreceptors in your brain, all right, we're back at normal, stop shivering. Yeah?
So the negative feedback, the negative part means stop doing the changes?
Yeah, you're excellent. You're right where I'm headed. Negative versus positive feedback, that's where PJ is. Negative feedback counteracts change. Negative feedback counteracts change. So what would positive feedback do? Yeah, stimulate or increase the change. Positive feedback increases the change. So we have one example here of negative feedback, right? You don't want to waste a bunch of energy shivering. So once your body temperature returns to normal, your body will tell us through negative feedback, those sensors, stop the process. We're going to quit shivering and wasting our energy. Can you think of another example of negative feedback? Maybe looking at some of our other homeostatic systems. Maybe thinking back to the unit we just finished about the circulatory system and the respiratory system. Yeah.
Would it maybe referring to blood pH
Okay.
as it pertains to Bohr?
Okay, so he's talking about blood pH and exercise in the Bohr shift. How can we get a little bit more elaboration on that?
well, wouldn't that be a positive feedback because it initiates the pH initiates the change in the rate of breathing and heart rate?
Okay, good. So you're with me there. The pH, you get a change in your pH, your blood pH, which is registered by the medulla, and then you initiate a sequence of events to increase your breathing rate and to increase your heart rate. But eventually, when you stop exercising, do you still want your heart to beat really fast, and do you still want to be breathing really fast? No, eventually you've got to send negative feedback to the sensors to say, all right, we're returning to normal. So that would be another case of negative feedback. Positive feedback is actually less common. Well, I'm going to give you a couple of examples of positive feedback, where you're going to increase the change in a system. Negative feedback is far and away the majority of regulatory mechanisms in your body. You have an example of positive? Oh, question, yeah.
So for the general pathway,
Yeah.
negative feedback is usually going to happen, but they don't counteract each other. Negative and positive feedback in one pathway.
Good question. Her question is, if negative feedback is used to regulate this, do they counteract each other, negative and positive feedback? This is the generalized pattern that you're going to need to know. So when you detect a change, you initiate a sequence, and then you slow down that sequence when you return to normal. Positive, I'm going to give you some examples of positive, and I think it'll help clarify this. Positive feedback, I'll give you a couple examples. You get injured, you have a cut, you're going to have coagulation of platelets forming a clot. They release clotting factors to stimulate more platelets to come and seal that wound. So clotting factors are an example of positive feedback. You're saying we need to increase this so that we can stop the bleeding. A second example of positive feedback, when a woman is in labor, she releases a hormone that causes or stimulates uterine contractions. That hormone, oxytocin, generates positive feedback, causing more and more contractions to occur. So think about a pregnant woman, and they're like, oh, I'm having contractions. The question is, how far apart are your contractions, right? They actually get closer and closer together when you get more close to the time of delivery. Right? So that's a positive feedback loop, stimulating that change. Does that help clarify? Yeah? Beast, you with me? Yeah? Questions? Nope. Okay, there's two types of communication systems you need to be aware of in our human body. There's the nervous system and the endocrine system. We are going to have a whole unit on nerves where we'll talk about neural function, nerve impulses, electrochemical gradients, action potentials, and all of that. For this unit, we're going to focus on the endocrine system, which is responsible for producing hormones. So the endocrine system generates hormones that travel through your circulatory system to receptors in your body. So you know that your circulatory system connects all of your cells. You also have a nervous system that has nerve impulses that go throughout the body. We're going to focus on the circulatory system in combination with the endocrine system to signal change in the human body. Okay? So let's talk about hormones by doing a generalized pathway for how hormones function. All right, a generalized hormone pathway, I'm going to give you 11 steps, and you'll have to pardon my drawing. It's going to be ugly, but we'll make it through. So we're going to start with a blood vessel. That's step one. We've got a blood vessel. The blood vessel contains within it these precursors to hormones. They're not hormones. They're going to be used to make hormones. So these are hormone precursors. On my website, I have a PowerPoint presentation that was put together by another teacher that shows this as an animation. It's an excellent resource. I'm drawing it now to slow myself down when we talk about it. But you can click through it on the PowerPoint, and it can go at your own pace. You can look back over it at home. Okay? For now, to explain, I'm going to go pretty slow. 1, we have a blood vessel. 2, we have hormone precursors. 3, we have an endocrine cell. And we're going to learn about where these cells are located in glands throughout the body. But for now, we know we've got a generalized endocrine cell. So here's what's going to happen. The precursors are going to be picked up by the endocrine cell. The endocrine cell then combines these precursors to form a full-fledged hormone. That's called hormone synthesis. All right? So we got a blood vessel, hormone precursors, endocrine cell, hormone synthesis, 4 steps. Hormones are made in endocrine cells, and they're actually packaged into vesicles. So vesicle formation, we learned about vesicles last year in endo and exocytosis. Vesicle formation is step 5. So we've got these hormones that are being made in your endocrine cells, and they're stored in vesicles. When you get a chemical signal through the bloodstream that says, release the hormones, it undergoes what process by which a vesicle fuses with the plasma membrane, releasing the contents outside of the cell? Exocytosis. So it undergoes exocytosis. So chemical signal is step 5. Oh, sorry, 6. Step 6. Step 7, you have exocytosis. So the hormone is actually released back into the bloodstream. I'm going to stop here and take questions about the first 7 steps. In your blood vessels, you have hormone precursors that are picked up by endocrine cells, and you undergo hormone synthesis where you combine these precursors to form a specific hormone structure. Those hormones are packaged in vesicles and stored in the endocrine cell until a chemical signals their release, and then undergoes exocytosis and puts the hormone into the bloodstream. Yes?
Are the endocrine cells fused with the membrane, or do the hormones, are they the membrane of the blood vessel, or are the hormones able to cross that membrane?
Good question. So her question is, are these adjacent to each other and touching, or are they somehow carried from the bloodstream to the endocrine cell? That's your question? Yeah. I'm going to show you a couple of animations about specific types of protein or specific types of hormones and how they're transmitted. For now, just know these are adjacent and it's picked up from the bloodstream. I will talk in more detail about target cells and how those hormones are received in a little bit. Just give me some time. Okay. Other questions about this? Yeah, please.
So how fast is this?
Good question. I don't know. I need to look. I know that hormones, let me go this route with you. There are different classes of hormones that have effects on the body. Some hormones are meant to work slowly over time, like human growth hormone, right? When you go through puberty and you're growing, you're getting growth hormone, and that process takes years. Some hormones are meant to give a signal immediately, within seconds, like adrenaline, right? That's meant to act very quickly. But how long this process itself takes, I'm not sure. I think it's going to depend on the hormone itself. Again, we're talking general, just an introduction today about generalized hormones. Okay. Other questions? The goal of this process, now that you've made this hormone, is to get the hormone to a target cell. So we'll have a target cell on the other side of our blood vessel here. So this is our target cell. The target cell has a specific receptor, so this is step 8. 9 is it's got a receptor here, and that receptor is going to correspond to the shape of the hormone. So we have a receptor on our target cell, which is step 9, that has a corresponding shape to the hormone, such that the hormone can actually bind to that target cell and affect the metabolic process. So the hormone comes and binds to the receptor on the target cell. It then alters the metabolic process and releases the hormone back as the precursor. So it separates the hormone into its precursor molecules. So 8, 9, 10, is affecting the metabolic process, and 11 is releasing back to the bloodstream. So I'm going to go through the 11 steps of the generalized pathway. Again, there's an animation on the website that will help you with this. Step 1, we've got a blood vessel that has step 2, precursors to hormones. Step 3, those hormones are absorbed by endocrine cells. And step 4, they are manufactured into hormones. Step 5, they are packaged in vesicles where they await step 6, which is a chemical signal that releases the hormones via step 7, which is exocytosis. Now you have hormones in your bloodstream that are picked up at target cells, step 8, that have specific receptor proteins on their surface, that's step 9. When the hormone binds, it affects the metabolism or the metabolic process of these cells, that's step 10, and then releases that hormone back as its component precursors. Question?
What are the target cells do you have to make?
Yeah, I'm going to show you some animations on this. Okay, there's different classes of hormones that affect target cells differently. There's two main classes. There's lipid-soluble hormones, which can travel directly through the phospholipid bilayer. They often will actually go into the nuclear membrane and interact directly with the DNA in the cell. Say, make more of this protein. We need it. Okay, or they can deactivate it. Say, stop making this protein. There are also water-soluble hormones which cannot penetrate the cell membrane directly, because remember, there's hydrophilic and hydrophobic regions to the membrane. So the water-soluble hormones cannot penetrate the membrane. And the water-soluble hormones trigger a reaction mechanism. I'm going to show you some videos on that. All right? Let me look here. We have slow effects, fast effects, lipid-soluble, water-soluble. I've got 4 video segments I want to show you. All right? Questions before we go to the video segments? Okay, cool.